Good afternoon. Welcome to the very first Working Lunch show of the year. Today is a very special show. Not only the fact that we are the first show of 2021, but we're on a new URL. Woo! For all those people who big up URLs, if you see at the top of the screen, it says 2021, not 2020. And the reason we do that is more technical than needs to be going into. Today is going to be an unusual show in as much as with all of the Working Lunch shows, we concentrate on a particular subject. Today, as I typically do, we're going to concentrate on all sorts of other things, namely the year ahead. But before we start, we are obviously having a Working Lunch. I need to know what's everyone having for lunch today. I have had, let me just show you, I have had several of these Skittles. That's my lunch for today. I'm on the wagon. And my very special guest today, I'm going to bring him on screen, is Mr. Hung Lee. Hung, let me just unfocus this. Hung, what have you had for lunch today and how the devil are you?
Hey, Stephen, how you doing? And hi, everybody. What have I had for lunch? I had yesterday's pasta. Yesterday's pasta. It wasn't even fresh, mate.
Actually, yesterday's pasta is always the best, or at least the sauce from yesterday is always better than it was yesterday. Is that not true?
You know what I did is shallow fry it. And I know this is like a weird thing to do, but I thought, right. Because I already mixed in sort of it was a penne or something, already mixed in the sauce with it. And I thought, right, I'll tell you what, instead of like steaming it or whatnot, we should make it just soggy. What I'm going to do is shallow fry it with some olive oil, make it a little bit, chewy and stuff like that. Actually, it wasn't too bad. I thought it was a decent number, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I always find that I need to, if there's pasta from yesterday and there's hardly any sauce on it, I'll cheat and I'll get out maybe a half a jar of Lloyd Grossman's and just chuck that in. You can't go too far wrong. Bit of tomato and basil.
Yeah, absolutely. Easy meal, man. Easy meal.
So Hung, we in a way we're kind of getting the band together. This is a bit like a reunion of the Tell Me I'm Wrong show that we did all those years ago.
I feel emotional because that show was amazing, and I actually hope they're still up somewhere because that was a really good concept. And for the people who are not familiar with it, it was the idea of we would just one of us, I think mainly you, Stephen, would take.
I was in the wrong every week.
Yeah, and we'd try and correct Stephen by bringing on guests with arguments against the topic, and it was a really good exercise.
So. Imagine me arguing with Lisa Scales on talking about salary inequality for sexes is bunkum, and she was telling me all the reasons why I was wrong, it was interesting. It was interesting. It was very good. Very good. So, Hung, the reason we're here today, we have a purpose. We're not just blethering. We have a purpose, and the title of the show is Crystal Balls and Wishing Wells. Crystal Balls, a bit of a looking into the future, and Wishing Wells what would you wish for? What would you want to happen in the next 12 months, in the next year? We're obviously at the beginning of the year now. Last year, who could have predicted at the start of the year what was going to happen? I reckon everyone who had on their bingo card all of the things that happened in the course of last year they'd have been out by April, May. And this year, are predictions worthwhile doing? Are they worthwhile doing at all? Or can we divine any kind of truth that would be that would stay with us through the year? What do you think, Hung?
Of course, predictions are worth doing. I think we always need to anticipate what the future looks like as best we can, with the caveat that, of course, we're not going to be accurate with it, and whatnot. But it's the foundation of, human cognitive ability is to figure out, okay, what are the chances of me not dying doing this and prospering doing that? So absolutely, we should be doing it. But we also need to understand that, we're not here to be prophets. We're just here to try and figure out, okay, is this more likely to happen than not?
And I think by making predictions, in a way, it's a bit like making your to-do list, things I'm going to get done. And as Mike Tyson said, everyone who had a plan, the plan changes as soon as you get punched in the face. But it doesn't stop people making a plan. It doesn't stop people from showing their intent and making that to-do list and saying, well, this is what I'd like to happen. This is what I'm going to plan to make happen. And I'll roll with the punches as and when they come.
Yep, absolutely. And it was a great comment by Mike Tyson. But that was in the context of him kind of neutralizing the opponent. But even him as a boxer, and he's a connoisseur of the boxing game, he knows that it's not sufficient just to rock up on the day and start swinging. He understands the need for strategy, but also understands that once you're in the middle of something, chaos might ensue. In which case you also need to have a plan for that. So, absolutely, I think we need to do it, and it's a good fun exercise. No big problems with that.
Superb. So before we get on to the serious end, I want to, because the Working Lunch is very much, it's a group enterprise. We're all involved. We might be on screen, but there's other people in the chat bar. Everyone's letting us know what they've had for the lunch. Debbie has had apples, red and green apples. Colin said chicken soup, butternut soup, butternut squash soup from James. Let's see, leftovers, Pippa Baker might have had. Somebody's on the fast day. Well, hi everybody, thanks everyone for joining in. Now, I should say, because this is a joint enterprise, we can all be sued jointly and severally for what we're doing here. Anyone who wants to join us on screen, please put your hand up, let us know. You can also ask questions in the bottom in the Ask a Question, or just shout loud enough and we'll get the gist. But if you want to come on screen, if you've got a point to share, if you've got a bone to pick with anyone, and no matter who, then we'll give you the floor space to do it. I know we're going to get Graham on screen as soon as we get through some of the niceties. Shafiq, Kim, Debbie, right? So hi everyone. Hung, for this year, we're obviously dealing with the remainder of 2020. 2020 did all sorts of things to all sorts of people. I think for the first time ever, fully healthy people were considering, is this the year I might have to check out through no other reason? I'm not smoking, I'm not drinking, I'm going to the gym, but I might get that thing that everyone's getting. Did you get the COVID last year, and are you better now?
Not as far as I'm aware. I mean, we all know now. It's like potentially there's a bunch of people like asymptomatic carriers, and the degree of viral load that you have also can determine how severe you might actually get disease. So I think there's a good chance I did, but didn't notice it. And I think my hope is that I will also be getting it in some way, but not express any disease on it. So I think the answer is, look, have I felt? Did I get a disease? Did disease manifest? No. Did I get COVID? I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, it is entirely possible that you've had it and not had any symptoms. So if so, then great. But people are obviously getting tested left, right, and centre. Have you been tested at any point? Have you been taken into a small room and?
No, I haven't. Simply because I essentially had taken a fairly defensive position from when this started, which is to say, you need to lock it down as much as you can, not only for your own well-being, but also as it's the minimum duty you have as a citizen to not spread it to anybody else. So I just said, stuff it. I'm gonna. Whatever the government says, I'm going to do more than that and stay home as much as I can. And I didn't want to pressure the testing system. It didn't look like we had a particularly efficient way of doing things and whatnot. And I just wanted to just not participate in the public healthcare system as much as I can, because the reason why this disease is problematic is because it surges and stresses that public healthcare system to the point where people who could be saved are not, because you don't reach them in time. So I thought, I need to pull myself completely out of the system, make sure I don't interfere and clog it up for other people that might need it more.
One of the really revealing things of the health crisis in the past 12 months is how people have responded to it. Whether it be, buying all the toilet paper in the supermarkets, which is kind of trivial, but, everyone can see, or wearing masks everywhere, or just locking down and staying in the house and getting everything ordered by Amazon or whoever your delivery company of choice is, and it is kind of revealing how people handle it. Whether they think, well, I'm fine, stuff everyone else, or I'm looking out for everyone else by doing this, that, and the other, and it kind of shows their character to an extent. What they're doing, how they're doing it.
I think it shows their experience or lack thereof, Stephen. I've got to be honest. If you study the history of these types of diseases, you'll find that actually the behaviors that we might lambaste right now, we've seen, they actually do occur in most circumstances where there is a novel experience of this. But don't forget, I mean, I believe 2003 actually got SARS, and it was like the worst flu, whatever it was. I was in bed for a week, coughing up everything, temperature through the roof, really bad. And that was at the point where I realized, okay, that was shit. And since that time, I've been very sensitive to these diseases, as most of Asia has been, because we've seen it. So I think the next time this thing comes around, everyone's going to be better prepared. But this is first time around for Europe, so
I don't want to bang on about the past too much, but we used to poo-poo or knock when you see people from from the Far East wearing masks on a regular basis, and that was normal. There would be fashionable masks and so on, and we would say, well, yeah, that's for them over there. That doesn't have to affect us. But and when you go through airports, you might see some people in masks and silently think, oh, I don't know what they think they're doing. But now we all know that along with other things, it's one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah, and just on that note, when SARS first came out, no one was wearing masks in Asia either. They had to find people before they did it. So it's a classic case where you simply have to put these nudge factors in to teach the people, look, this is something you're going to have to do. You don't have a choice on it. It's not about using your common sense, quote unquote. One of the big problems we've got under this government is that it just assumes that common sense is the solution for everything. Or let's have a cup of tea over Brexit, we'll sort it. That kind of attitude is just carried on into the pandemic. We'll sort it. Let's take the weekend off. We'll deal with it on Monday. All that BS.
So I don't want this. This is not a recap show. We shouldn't be recapping so much of 2020. If we were going to have a recap show, it should have been in December. But this is a looking forward show. However, the looking forward show will include the things that have, as I said before, knocked on to this year from last. What are the big features of 2020 that we're still dealing with now that have changed everything for good?
Obviously, the shift to remote is the biggest single factor, I think, for anybody in our business, being in recruiting, HR, that kind of thing. That, I think, has got all kinds of immediate effects that we've been witness to, but it'll have like a lot of second order effects that will really have a significant impact on our relationship with business, our relationship with work, our relationship with each other. So it's a huge game changing, seismic shift, and we'll be wrestling with that for a very long time.
I think there's a I think that people talk about in the stock market called the dead cat bounce, which is when a stock plummets as low as it's going to go, but then comes back again, maybe 20% of its initial value, but it falls down and then bounces back up again. The reason I mention that is that whenever there's a dramatic shift in behaviour, in things happening, then it's often the case that things go to the way extreme and then bounce back a little, because people are maybe trying to pull back to what they used to, or they thought they maybe went too far in the first place. And I think that can apply to a lot of behaviours, not just the working from home, but also the way people are dealing with health, the way that people deal with politics, the way people deal with, as I say, stocks, investments, that sort of thing. And it leads to a kind of zigzag. And if you imagine yourself in a car that's got too much power and you're trying to straighten the steering wheel, you're going left and right and left and right. I think there's going to be quite a bit in that in all the areas that are of concern. And obviously the bigger themes are pandemic, politics, and especially for us, work and hiring, and so on. So setting aside pandemic and politics, we know that those are overreaching everything. The working from home is probably the biggest immediate thing that people are feeling from last year. But coming back to work, are you seeing many people going back at the start of the year, appearing at their offices for the first time in months?
Again, I think you need to take the global context on this. And I think a couple of factors that are involved in whether there will be a bounce back to the office, one of which is how well the respective governments have actually been in controlling the pandemic. If you look at Asia Pac, for instance, most of them are back in the office. Why? Because their lockdown was like one-off, 3 months done, and they more or less got it under control. They are back to quote-unquote normal. However, you look at where we're at in Europe, we're going to be oscillating backwards and forwards into this lockdown, not lockdown, quarantine, not quarantine, until we actually get something sorted. That's well into this year. It's going to be 18 months, maybe 24 months of this. And the longer it lasts, the easier it is for CEOs to say, look, we can't, it's the switching between one and the other, which is causing us the trauma. We're just gonna go remote, stuff it, and do it that way. So I think the impact and the distribution of remote is directly tied to the competence of the government in charge.
Yeah. Well, that oscillation, as you say, that stop-start lockdown and stop-start on levels of restrictions is leading a lot of people to think, well, if we can say we were allowed to go back to work today, everyone can do that, and then next week it's a stop again, then instantly people say, well, we were okay last week. What's the difference between then and now? And people are not understanding the science or what goes into the decisions made on the advice that's being given. And I personally think that there's no understanding of it. I think you would just hurt your head to try and work out the reasoning behind it. And really all you have to do is go along with the advice and trust that clever people who know what they're doing are going over more information than you are and deciding this is the thing to do.
That's true, but I've got a lot of sympathy with the people. I've got to be honest with you, Steve, because I think that you have to be very consistent and clear as a government. You have to provide clarity of communication, and that's not something we've ever had, sadly enough. In the UK, I'm sure there's other examples as well. I'm not just here lambasting Johnson, even though I think he's incompetent. Needs to be removed from office ASAP.
Hung, you can swear as much as you like on this show. It's not a problem.
Leaving aside that objective analysis of our Prime Minister, I would say that the lack of just the inconsistent communication we're getting. Who was that guy, Gavin Williamson or whatever? He was about suing councils for daring to stop schools. And then 48 hours later, he's issuing orders to stop the schools from happening. So that degree of inconsistency, if you're a person on the end of that, then of course you're going to have puzzlement and contemporary government communication. So I got sympathy with the people. I think we've been just as poorly led as we can be led. I actually think the government in question does not know how to do management, basic decision making, which is, by the way, you only need to make a decision when it's hard. That's what decisions are there. That's what chief executives are there for. When there's a hard decision to make, when it's inobvious whether it's A or B, you've got to make a call and say, it's going to be B, folks. This is my call. Johnson can't do that. He just waits for the events to take over, and then that's it. That's what's going to happen.
People are often very forgiving of politicians or chief executives when they make a slightly wrong mistake and it has catastrophic circumstances come out of it. They say, well, I'd maybe have made the wrong decision as well. Well, the thing is these people are in that position because they're supposed to be capable of making the big decisions and calling it right more often than not. And they're held to a higher standard. So you expect more from business leaders. You expect people who are leading their company. If you're in a company with a small company with a chief executive, you expect them to show leadership in times of crisis. And there are some people that I've seen who've been exemplary in that, and others who have flapped, frankly, and not been sure what to do.
I think business has generally been good. I mean, you compare that with politicians, then there's no question. I think businesses generally have been significantly better. We've lacked political leadership in this country. And by the way, it's the last bit I want to say on Boris Johnson, but talking about decision making, one of the things we've got to take responsibility for is our decision making for voting him in there. That's
a fair point. But he's a politician who could not find his arse with both hands, and it seems that he goes out of his way to cock it up. But going beyond that, bringing it around to the work context, we're seeing that work environments are changing. Do you see, as I think I'm seeing, that the days of the long commute, 5 days a week from the counties into the centre of London or the centre of any any big city where people are spending 2 hours to get to work on a tin tube and then 2 hours to get home at night. Are those days gone? Will they be gone?
I hope so, but we're still building the HS2, aren't we? Multi-billion-dollar boondoggle that we're just throwing up there. Building it for yesterday's world. But yeah, no one misses the commute. I mean, even the people who are advocating back to the office and saying, hey, we need to build company culture. We need to have the innovation. We need to have the energy that you get from being in office. We need to also potentially give people the space to get away from family sometimes, that kind of thing. All of the advocates for in the office, I don't see anybody really loving the commute as in any of that. So yeah, the commute's gonna go. Companies that will go full remote, I think, will do it. Companies that will go fully on premise and can force that, or shall we say, are prepared to sacrifice the retention and recruitment capacity by going down that, will probably do it as well. But we're gonna be not having big offices in super expensive places where we've got a small percentage of staff commuting in. That makes no sense.
So I used to kind of jokingly say, because I've never commuted any distance, the furthest I've commuted for work is 2 miles. So I always reckon if you live more than half an hour away from work, then you either live in the wrong place or you work in the wrong place. Fix one or the other. Now, of course, that's not always realistic if someone wants to be a barrister and all the barrister work is done in the middle of London. But I can see that large organisations with big offices can distribute those jobs out to smaller hubs in other places that are going to be less expensive, that are going to be closer to where workers live. They're going to be less dense in terms of the number of people in any one location, and it's going to, in a way, kind of democratise or distribute those jobs around the country. Maybe taking the jobs to where the skills are as opposed to where the expensive housing is. And when you do that, though, I think there will be a big difference between jobs that are location specific, where you literally have to be there. If you're a hairdresser, then you have to be where your customers are. But if you're selling, hair products, then you can have an online store and do things remotely. So there are all sorts of jobs that can be done remotely. I share an office here with a firm of lawyers, and they're in court day in, day out online. The judge is on Zoom or whatever platform it is they use. The judge, the witnesses, the other lawyers. It's much more casual. And you would think that's one of the things you would think you have to have online, but no, there's a sheriff court online, and they're going through the process of the law. And if it comes to juries, I think there's a different environment for that. But what I'm getting at is that jobs will be redesigned where the jobs that, or the elements of a job that have to be location specific, you'll have employees that are doing those, and other jobs that you can parcel up all the work that doesn't have to be in any particular place. Those can be classified as flexible on location. You can be based anywhere. I've heard people talking about the once or twice a week coming into the office, and I'm not entirely sure I understand what those kinds of jobs would be. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a cop-out. I mean, I think ultimately people we've reached to this hybrid as a solution, but really we've settled on it because we didn't have to make a decision because we're currently under quarantine. When we get out of this from a public health point of view, we actually have to make decisions. Are we on-premise? Are we remote? Are we hybrid? Then we're going to start making some really tough decisions. We'll end up doing all three. But I think hybrid is going to be mega inefficient. We're going to be spending a huge amount of energy to try and make that happen. There's going to be a lot of forced communality, so to speak, which will be uncomfortable and actually will erode a lot of the efficiency gains from being either one or the other. And then you're going to get companies, I think, will make whatever trade-off it is and commit one way or the other. You're right about certain jobs. Most of the jobs, I would imagine most of the people watching the jobs, most of the people doing jobs watching this now probably could do it from remote, I would guess.
Well,
Yep. Good afternoon. I've invited on Hung. I've invited on Graham. GPS. Hung, do you know Graham?
I hope I do, but if I don't, good to meet you, Graham.
Shame on you if you don't.
Good to meet you.
Graham is world famous.
Only by reputation. I know Hung by reputation. And
I've
listened to him many times.
Graham, thanks for joining us. I'm sure you've heard where we're up to so far.
Yes, I have.
Your perspective on the year ahead, I'm really interested to find out, because you're involved with a number of businesses, and obviously you've a long history in business, particularly in recruitment, but you're involved with a number of businesses who themselves, their boards will be sitting down and their management team will be sitting down and thinking, right, shit, what are we going to do this year? How do we do it? How do we make things happen? And how do we hit revenue targets at the end of the year that make it worthwhile to be in business?
Well, there's a few general points. I mean, the first prediction is Boris will still be in power at the end of the year, regardless of what we think of him or how he's done or whatever. I mean, he's not going anywhere in the short term. He'll be here for another 3 years at least. A couple of points in terms of how I think the way that the UK and Western Europe has handled the crisis. Hung's quite right. We're a long way behind Asia. I was in Asia. I was in Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand at the beginning of the year until mid-January, I suppose, thereabouts, over the end of last year and beginning of this year. And it is de rigueur. I mean, regardless of what the health situation is at the time in that place. Some say it's pollution, but generally it's de rigueur. People are wearing masks. The vast majority, certainly in the cities, are wearing masks. Well, I think that will be the case going forward to the West. I think businesses have to be flexible. Business predictions are extremely important. So the most obvious business prediction is a budget. You know, this is what we're going to do. But the way you do a budget, and that's frozen in a moment in time. What you don't do is you don't keep revisiting that. What you then do is you start forecasting. So what I try and do with all the businesses I work with is you forecast based on what's in front of you, and you don't try and forecast out too much. We did one of these towards the end of last year where I was talking to somebody and they were saying that the idea of 5-year plans has completely gone out the window, and rightly so. There's nothing wrong with that going out the window. As long as you're doing some sort of planning, you've got to be planning for what is a realistic amount of time for your own business. If that is a month or a quarter, then that's fine, but it shouldn't be any less than that. And it should be at least you're doing that. The best businesses that I've seen, I've done catch-ups with several of my businesses. Brazil, remarkably resilient, went right down, sort of 50% off revenues, and they've come back. He's rehired, he's got a new office, and he's still, Brenner, who was on one of these shows early last year, he's very, very positive. Africa, as they said this morning, I had catch up with them all this morning, at the start of every year, there is a crisis in Africa, or there will be a crisis in Africa. And it can be a health crisis, it can be an oil crisis, it can be foreign direct investment crisis. There will always be in Africa something across the continent, 52 countries. So they don't know exactly what it's going to be. It started with COVID, it could be something else. They have to adapt and they have to be flexible. And that's the key thing, being flexible.
It seems to be, you mentioned Africa there, and I may be getting this completely wrong, but it's standard fare, it's normal and accepted that in most countries in Africa, there's always going to be political turbulence. There's rarely a steady as she goes, boring government where businesses can, in the long term, predict the boundaries within which they're running their company.
I'm not. Africa is a big place, and it's 50 odd countries, 52 countries at least, and each one is different. And in some cases, you could argue, and it's true of the Far East as well, there are places where it's a very definite business environment and it's very predictable because it doesn't change because you have an autocracy. And there are quite a lot of African countries like that where leaders have been in power for many, many years and decades. There are still ways of doing business. Cross-border business is much more difficult, cross-border in terms of cross-country border as opposed to cross-continent border. But you can predict. That's why recruiters have been doing business in China for 30 odd years that I know of. And Vietnam, both communist countries, both countries where you have a very definitive style of operating. You can do certain things. And then there are other countries, some countries in Africa and elsewhere, perhaps I probably better not mention any names, where they are corrupt. And you know that to operate in that country, you have to be able to operate in a certain way.
Yeah.
There are numerous examples.
Bringing it back to the UK, the the big things that are on the table just now that will affect the men and women in the streets are obviously Brexit. We have now Brexited. The pandemic, which is ongoing. We're hoping that we're all going to get the jab sometime soon. Apparently, the target from the Scottish government is that everyone over 50 will be vaccinated by May at some point, which I think is ambitious, but great to go for. And of course the recession that's coming on account of those things, as well as kind of the roll on of political turmoil that's coming from the USA, which certainly affects the tone everywhere. So to the man in the street with these things hanging over them, how are they going to see differences in their daily lives, their daily working lives? Graham?
I think the first thing that they'll do is understand that scientists and politicians are no better at making predictions than anybody else. It's the only thing you can't predict is the future. They're consistently wrong, and that will continue well into the future. And I think most normal people, the man in the street, as you describe it, they will be aware of that. And they know that most of what comes out of politicians' mouths is complete BS. And that's true of any politician. And that will continue to be the case. They will realise that the scientists really haven't got much of a clue. They're running around like blue-ass flies. They don't really know enough. And it's happened so fast, particularly in the West, where it wasn't an area of expertise for us. I think that they'll be looking forward to getting the vaccine. It's very ambitious, the targets that have been set for the vaccines, but let's hope that some stage this year, most people who want it will have it. Let's hope that most people want it. I think that there will be a lot more negative anti-news, fake news, but anti-news. So this is in the news, but you shouldn't do it anyway type of stuff. I think that will continue happening. I think from the business perspective, the man in the street will expect it to get back to normal-ish, whether that means going back to an office, being able to carry out your work as a tradesman more freely without having to wearing a mask as opposed to going without one. I think the flexibility that you touched on right at the very beginning with Hung in terms of the working from home thing, that is probably the biggest thing that's come out of it, and one thing you can definitely predict is going to continue. Businesses are able to see that you can operate remotely. I mentioned Africa earlier on. One of the things that the clients in Africa, this is a search business, they only do search in Africa. And 25 people on the call today were all told, our clients now know we can recruit remotely. They don't physically have to meet the person until they start on site or even in their hotel room in one case, because we've done it, we've proved it. It's not just we don't have to be in Africa physically to do it. Our clients and candidates, our candidates don't have to be either. So I think that's going to be the biggest impact. Yeah.
Hung, can I ask? I know you're what I'd call one of these a bigger thinker, bigger picture thinker in terms of how people are considering themselves, their own aptitude, their own ability to be resilient, their own ability to handle things going forward. I'm really surprised that people have shown up as much resilience as they have. I thought there would be so many more people on a tipping point, and obviously the furlough scheme has really helped there. But individuals and businesses not going to the wall or bailing out or having a meltdown in greater numbers is the biggest surprise to me. Do you think people are now used to it? People are now their mindset is readjusted. They think, right, let's get on with things. Let's do whatever we need to pay the bills and get through this year and get back to a proportion of where we were a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the people have responded in some sort of angles in a magnificent manner. We're not talking about individual governments here or whatnot. We're talking about people in the community stepping up and doing stuff and helping each other out, often taking leadership. positions where there's no reason why that person should be in charge of that, but he's just stepped up and done it. So I think there's examples at high and low levels, local and national, where we've seen that. We've seen it in our industry, haven't we? Where people have just taken it upon themselves to say, right, I'm going to try and at least help this one person or this one company, and they've gone ahead and done that. So I think we've all responded to it in a strange way. Positive and negative stuff is kind of contagious itself. When you see like someone do something that's very altruistic, and it's like, okay, this person's really done this, it's inspirational, and you step in and you want to do your bit as well. And I think we've seen evidence of that. Can go the other way, of course, negatively, but overall, I think you can say, at the level of the people, I would even say a level of companies, there's been multiple examples of that. And that's one of the positive things actually I've taken from this experience generally, is just a reminder that there's a lot of humanity out there, and that's been underlined for me these last 12 months or so.
So do you reckon there's a big opportunity for individuals when we get down to individual people who are in an individual role, whether it be in HR or recruitment or any other workplace, that individuals can decide, right, I'm going to push for this to happen or for that to happen. I would like working practices to change. I would like the hours that we work to change. I would like the way that we deal with clients to change. That people are in a position to say what they want to say and be heard by their organisations, because people are looking around for leadership. Even the owners of businesses are looking around for people who will take the initiative.
On that note, I think absolutely. I mean, the impact of remote is a part of that, because what's occurred is that we've suddenly had to operate much more independently in a self-directed way. I mean, you can imagine, previously, if you're working in a 10,000 man organization in a bank somewhere, you'd have to have so many checkpoints and so many people to say yes, no, maybe before you can do anything. The physical proximity of that is going to have an impact. If your boss is sitting next to you or across the other desk, inevitably that's going to be a reference point for you when you're in on premise. But I think the impact is kind of sort of the diffusion, if you like, physical diffusion of people into different sort of locations and out of sight has caused everyone to have to take a little bit more responsibility. And probably that's going to be a persistent sort of aspect, even if for companies that do return to the office. I think you'll see a lot more ground up type initiatives coming up from the workforce.
Yeah. It's certainly the case in recruitment companies that people who take the initiative are usually rewarded. If you take the bull by the horns and decide, I'm going to go and do this, give me 3 weeks, boss, to research a market that I want to pivot to work in, where my market has dried up. I'm going to switch to doing accountancy or legal or whatever, and then push and make it happen. That's usually recognised well.
Or they leave. Yeah, Jerry Maguire or Tony Goodwin. I don't know if Tony told the story, but he came to me with the idea of setting up in Poland and Eastern Europe. And I said, I sent him to Bristol to manage Bristol for me. That's about as far as where I could get him. And years later, I bought one of his businesses. I bought his Russian business off him for $25 million. So it was I was like the guy that didn't sign the Beatles.
Well done, Tony.
I just want to answer the question that's appeared in the chat.
Is that from Chintan?
Salaries. Yeah, whether the remote model is going to change the salary. I don't think it's going to have a massive impact. It will have a marginal impact, if I'm honest. And I've been doing some work on this recently. I do think that the candidate pool has definitely expanded, and that's not a bad thing. In some areas of tech, for example, that it's always been like that. You go wherever you can get the talent, and you use the talent wherever it is. I think more areas will do that. I don't think it's going to push salaries down, to be honest. I think other than marginally in some areas. And as Louis says, to be fair, Bristol is very nice. Yeah. Quite right.
I reckon so. A bit like house prices, salaries really go down. It can happen, but they really go down. They sometimes go away altogether, but not down. And salaries are always an arbitrary measure of anything, because it's a salary of a doctor compared to the salary of a headmaster compared to the salary of a binman. The parity levels is what people look at. Am I earning more than you or less than that other person? And do I have enough to live on? if they're thinking, well, I'm a doctor, I should have a certain level of standard of living, then it's kind of a societal thing where we all kind of look each other in the eye and say, yeah, you should be earning more, you should be earning less. But go from country to country and you'll see that the priorities will be slightly different. So when we're talking about the model changing and people working remotely, then it's the salary will be in comparison to what the salary was working at home, and an employer might justify a change in salary. They might say, well, we're going to pay you less because you're not working in London anymore. You don't need to pay sky-high rents and mortgage, even though the person is still living in London. Or the person might say, well, actually, I'm working from home now. I need to be paid more because I need to have an additional room in my house. I need to be insured for working from home, my home premises. I need, all of these things bought and paid for. So I think actually, whilst I might be saving on commuting, I'm spending more time because there's other things to be considered. So it's a negotiation, and there's a push and pull on what salaries are required to do the jobs that you're in, and the jobs themselves will be changing.
It's a balancing act, and that'll be true for the individual employee. And also for the employers. And for some employers, you physically can't. I've got a good friend who's a policeman. He's a police dog handler. He can't work from home, obviously. And nor would any of us want him to.
Sorry, Graham. I just had an image of a guy controlling a dog remotely. That would be quite an incredible, terrifying thing to see.
They have tried it. In the military, they have tried that.
A remote control canine.
It doesn't necessarily work. Exactly. I don't think there'll be many examples in answers to Erin's question of employees taking employers to start saying, well, I'll come back to the office, but I need more money. I think the market is going to be too flexible and too fluid for that. I'm not sure that there will be massive changes in the markets as we now see them. I think that there will be minor structural changes, but I think those changes will come next year and the year beyond.
There are variables in the market now that when people are considering accepting a job or applying for a job, then they'll be, first of all, employer brand. They'll be looking at, well, how did this company handle the crisis? What did they do that I'd be in favour of? And also, if I'm thinking about going to work somewhere, what's their policy on health? Is everyone wearing a mask? Are they not wearing a mask? Will they employ someone who hasn't had the jab yet? Are they saying, well, we'll only hire people if you've already had your inoculation?
That's a really interesting one,
Will people have those immunity passports that I was talking about last year, where you've got an access all areas card? If you're going along to industry events or social events to see, bands or go to pubs, are you only going to get access if you've got the card, if you've had the jab, if you're somehow proven to be clear?
The problem is policing that. I think theoretically, absolutely right. Exactly the same way as everyone going to a supermarket is wearing a mask now. They're not, and policing it. Our local supermarket in the village is staffed by kids. It's managed by kids. They're at best in their early 20s. They can't tell big burly builders who come in the middle of the afternoon without masks on.
So the movement of people is the greatest persuader of businesses. If people were staying away from Sainsbury's but going to Asda because Sainsbury's have a loose policy, and Asda have a swipe your card at the door to say that you're clean before you go in, then that could come around. Now I'm not speculating that it will, but we're in the speculation show. So it's the sort of thing
ID card thing by the back door. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, can I just pick up something you mentioned earlier in terms of relative earnings to whatever? You're far too young to remember, both of you, but in the late 60s, the socialist government that we had in the UK at the time set up something called the Relativities Commission, where it basically said what a job was worth, and it was on a scale, and which class it was in, which that's the thing I always loved. I was at university in the early 70s, and in the mid 70s, and I was one of the things we learned. It was absolutely fascinating. My parents were servants, so we were very lower class, unfortunately. There was no getting out of that, even putting a decent title on it. So it's been done before. The market generally will rule in countries where we don't have autocracies. The market will generally rule. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but those with the talent will generally get paid a bit more than those without. And there will always be vocational people, the bin men, the doctors, whatever, who will get paid on a scale depending on what the local populace, hopefully, bureaucracy more likely, feels they're worth paying or what they can get away with.
What you see in those jobs where you're in contact with the public, and it might be the unwashed public who don't have the cards we're talking about. Would you expect, if you're working in retail or hospitality, that you would get that 10% weighting on your salary for the risk involved in the job?
They won't get it. Whether or not they should is another matter. I mean, they definitely won't get it. My daughter, my youngest, she's 28 now. She has. She manages a branch of Waterstones, and her boyfriend manages a very big branch of Waterstones in another city, and they are very, very poorly paid, and the chance of them getting any more because they're facing the public on a daily basis when they are, they're not at the moment, but when they are.
Well, the margins in the book business are wafer thin.
Ditto in supermarkets. I mean, they're loss leaders and 30% of the shelves. So it's different. Yeah. Sorry, Hung wants to jump in. My apologies. I'll shut up now.
Not at all, Graham. I think I was just going to.
It's a nightmare for you having me and Stephen, isn't it? Because we can't shut us up.
Honestly, Graham, I was really interested to hear your thoughts on it because, those jobs that do have this risk, this element of risk facing the public and what have you, they are the jobs that are going to be considered even if they're high status, they're going to decline in status because people don't want to do them. And that's going to have all kinds of impacts in terms of how you actually incentivize people to do it. I don't see salaries going up. I think they're going to be automated as much as possible. Again, you look at Asia, go to a restaurant there, there's robots serving you. It's like conveyor belts throwing stuff down at you. Mm-hmm. People don't want to be served by another human being because there's just an additional risk. Even if you can say, look, our numbers like 0.01, whatever, it's still never going to be zero. So you're going to think, right, you don't want to have the human contact. So I think there's going to be some really interesting implications as to what jobs are remotable. The ones that aren't, I do wonder where that's going to end up. I think, unfortunately, those jobs are very vulnerable to an automated solution in some way.
Can I ask, guys, we're getting to the end of our time, and there's a couple of questions that we've been asked that I'd like to get to. James asks, do you think when we start getting back to the normal, or what we would consider normal, that the focus on mental health and mindfulness will be left behind? Will it be a casualty of let's get back to doing what we do? Has it been a luxury in the past while where people are talking a lot about mental health and mindfulness?
I don't know about not necessarily using the word mindfulness or well-being, which seem to have become almost industrial words now. But good employers, in my experience, in my 4 decades or whatever in the business, have always been cared about their employees. Certainly in this industry, it's in the recruitment industry. And its allied areas, you can't run a business successfully, even if you've got hundreds of employees, if you don't care about those people. That's my personal view, and certainly what I've seen. I don't know about mega corporations, but I think bosses, managers, directors, CEOs need to be thinking about that. I don't think that's going to go away. It's got labels attached to it now, but I don't think it's changed massively.
Yeah, I suppose people
will change.
The question is asking, will what's been done in the past while, has that been lip service, and will that fade away when there's business to be done? Hung, can I ask you the final question? And this is from James Osborne. If geography is going to be less of a question for some people with working from home becoming more commonplace, do you think more workers in the future will elect to have multiple part-time freelance jobs instead of having one full-time job to give themselves more variety?
It's already happening. It's a natural. I mean, if you think about the history of a firm, like why you would actually create a firm rather than just have a network of freelancers working for you, is predominantly to monopolize the ability of the other person to earn elsewhere. Recruitment is a classic example. The reason why you want them in the building is so they're not doing a deal off the site. That's why you have it. So, and in any employment contract in a permanent manner, there's always a clause there to prevent that person from earning elsewhere. So I think in future, remote will definitely promote the idea of people rejecting contracts of that type. We're going to see a lot more people saying, "Oh, I've got my own limited. Can we work in this way?" And they'll work multi-revenue, like a portfolio style. So the answer, in short, is yes.
To my mind, flexible working has always been more precarious. If you had, 2 or 3 companies or pieces of work that you did on a regular basis, then you could be dropped from it. You don't have much by way of protection from from losing any of those. If there was more protection and it became more normal and people were able to assert themselves in getting those roles, then I could see the benefit where if you've got a patchwork quilt of work that you do, if you lose one of them, it's not the end of the world and you can replace that with the other. But of course the trade-off is that you're continually on the market, you're continually looking and hustling for more work, where so many people out there, they just want to have a job. They don't want to keep looking for a job because that's a pain in the backside.
Yeah,
it'll be a substantial minority.
Yeah, it'll suit a certain category of person. Exactly. They call it the difference between the privileged freelancer and the precarious freelancer, and I think that distinction needs to be very clearly made.
Yeah, excellent. So, guys, we've gone way over time. I normally look for these shows to be about half an hour, 40 minutes. We've gone way over. Can I say a huge thanks? Looks like we're sitting, tallest to smallest here. But a big thanks, Hung and Graham. Graham, can I just ask one favour before you go? Debbie said that whenever you're on screen, she gets sensory overload. So could you stand up so we can see a bit more of that shirt there? Because the shirt, the zebra and the wallpaper are just crazy. That is fantastic. Where do you get your shirts, Graham?
I was going to say, it's absolutely magnificent.
Claudio Lulli, this one.
Fantastic.
I think, Claudio Lulli, this one.
Okay, it might be an expensive shirt, but it's a good investment, and
it's a fantastic investment. You wear them for years.
It'll appreciate in value over time.
And no one will forget you. 160. So
yeah, I see you've got elephants on your shirt, and with your pods, you're kind of your pods in your hair. You're kind of giving that elephant look at the same time.
Thank you. I was going for lion, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Is coming from a well-meaning place. So, guys, thank you very much. I should apologise to anyone who's looking at this manual that we have here. This was the best that we could do. These are the only people that we could get coming along. Next time, I promise to bring more women onto the show. Unfortunately, I cannot
more attractive
be a woman.
People, definitely.
So, yeah, absolutely. So, I'm gonna bring more women, more diversity next time. And in the meantime, have a smashing afternoon. Have a great July. Have a great January and a July as well, and a fantastic rest of the year. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. Bye.